The water turned black overnight, and the moment I stepped onto my porch, I felt a chill run through me. Not from the morning breeze, but from the sight of my beloved Clearwater Lake transformed into something unrecognizable. This lake had been my sanctuary for over 20 years, a mirror of calm that reflected the sunrise, the mountains, and the peaceful rhythm of my life. Every morning, I'd wade out to my old wooden dock, cast my line into the cool blue water, and let the sound of rippling waves wash the world's worries away. It was more than a hobby. Fishing was my meditation, my quiet ritual, my way of grounding myself after years of working high-stress jobs far from any real calm. But this morning, there was no calm, only chaos disguised as darkness. The surface of the water wasn't just dark, it was thick and oily, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Dead fish floated everywhere, their silver bellies glinting like morbid warning signs. The air reeked of chemicals, burning my nose with every breath. Something terrible had happened, and the moment I spotted tire tracks leading straight from the lake's edge into the woods, I knew it wasn't natural. Someone had done this, and I already had a good idea of who. The trouble started weeks earlier when Harmony Ridge HOA bought development land just across the hill. Before them, the nearest neighbor was a good mile away, just how I liked it. But when their neighborhood popped up, suddenly there were rules, letters, complaints, and a woman named Karen who believed her authority extended far beyond her property line. Karen was the kind of person who thought her laminated HOA badge gave her the power of a small dictator. She sent me warnings, yes, warnings, about things like the appearance of my mailbox, the number of bird feeders hanging from my trees, and even the unsightly nature of my fishing equipment. All of this despite the fact that I wasn't, and never would be, part of their HOA. My property stood independent, older than their entire community, and legally protected from their jurisdiction. But Karen did not take no authority for an answer. Her biggest obsession became my lake, or rather, the fact that she believed it was hers. The first confrontation happened when she marched down to my dock, hands on her hips, and shouted that community activities must be regulated. I told her politely to step off my land. She stormed away, furious and embarrassed, but not defeated. Over the next week, she rallied her board members, spreading nonsense about how my fishing was disturbing the peace and lowering property values. I thought it was laughable. Annoying, sure, but harmless. I didn't realize the lengths they would go to just to stop me from doing what I loved. But the proof was right in front of me now. The tire tracks were fresh. They led straight toward the HOA's maintenance shed. And judging from the chemical smell spreading across the lake, they had dumped something strong enough to kill everything in the water within hours. My heart tightened. This lake wasn't just part of my property. It was part of an ecosystem, a home for fish, migrating birds, turtles, plants, and every living thing that depended on clean water to survive. Whoever poisoned it didn't just target me, they committed a crime against nature. But the most ironic, shocking part? Harmony Ridge HOA had no idea that the lake they poisoned wasn't just a lake. It was the source of their entire community's drinking water supply. They had attacked the one resource their neighborhood could not survive without. And as I stood there, staring at the darkened water, I realized one thing with absolute certainty. This was going to blow up in their faces, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. The HOA thought they could hide everything behind closed doors, but they underestimated just how determined I was to uncover the truth. After discovering the chemical drums and following the tire tracks through the woods, I knew I needed to see how far they were willing to go. The Harmony Ridge emergency meeting was scheduled for that afternoon, and although I wasn't a member of their precious association, I had every intention of walking right into that room. As I approached the community center, the parking lot was overflowing with angry residents, all complaining about brown tap water, headaches, rashes, and the foul smell coming from their sinks. People were demanding answers from anyone wearing an HOA badge, but the board members kept repeating the same useless line. "We're investigating the issue." Investigating my foot, they knew exactly what they had done. When I entered the meeting room, the entire board froze, especially Karen, who looked like someone had just unplugged her power source. She immediately tried to regain control, slapping her gavel on the table like she ran the town. "This meeting is for HOA members only," she said with that fake smile she used whenever she was trying to look polite, but still maintain control. I placed the half-burned clipboard on the center of the conference table. "Great," I said. "Then you'll be interested in seeing this." The room went silent. Karen stared at the paperwork, her face draining of color as she recognized her own signature, authorizing a pest control action near the lake. One of the board members leaned forward, squinting at the chemical names. His jaw dropped. "These are banned pesticides," he whispered, "not allowed within a mile of a water source." Another member muttered, "Oh my God, this is serious." But Karen tried to bluff her way through. "We simply asked maintenance to clear pests. It is not our fault if the lake was already in poor condition." I couldn't help laughing. "Poor condition? That lake has been pristine for 20 years. You poisoned it because you didn't want me fishing on my own land." Gasps filled the room. Residents who had been quietly sitting began to murmur among themselves. Someone in the back stood up and shouted, "So you're the reason our water smells like chemicals?" Another yelled, "My kids have been drinking that." Karen slammed the gavel again, panic replacing her fake confidence. Calm down, calm down. We don't know anything for certain yet." I cut her off. "Yes, we do. Your maintenance crew used industrial pesticide to contaminate a natural lake. And guess where your drinking water comes from? That very same lake." The eruption of screams and accusations was immediate. People turned on the board in an instant. Fingers were pointed, chairs scraped the floor, and the room began to feel like a volcano ready to blow. One elderly man shoved a board member's binder off the table and shouted, "We trusted you. You've poisoned us." Another woman demanded, "Is our water safe? Are we sick? Are our kids sick?" But even with all the chaos, Karen kept trying to manipulate the situation. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted. "We will handle this internally." But no one was listening anymore. I watched as residents stormed toward the table, shoving documents aside and taking pictures of the clipboard for evidence. The board members looked like cornered animals. Their perfect little world was falling apart faster than they could control it. And then came the final blow. A maintenance worker slipped into the room, pale and sweating, holding another set of documents. I can't take the blame for this," he stuttered. "You told me to dump the chemicals. You said it would fix the fishing problem. I didn't know the water plant used the lake." Karen's face hardened into a look of pure dread. The room exploded again. I didn't have to say a single word. The truth had spoken for itself, and the real fallout was only just beginning. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected, and once the maintenance worker confessed, the entire situation spiraled beyond the HOA's control. That night, long after the sun had set, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, the same maintenance worker stood there, trembling, clutching a stack of papers like they were the only thing keeping him alive. His voice shook as he spoke. "Sir, I'm not a bad person. They forced me to do it. Please, please don't let them blame me for all of this." He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since the dumping incident. His uniform still smelled faintly of chemicals, and his hands shook badly as he handed me the documents. They were copies of the original work orders, ones he'd kept before Karen tried to burn the records. And every single sheet showed the same thing. The HOA board, led by Karen, had authorized the pesticide dump, fully aware they were using restricted chemicals. But the most important part was the note scribbled in Karen's own handwriting. "Ensure fish population is eliminated. Make lake unusable for private activity." That was their real goal. Destroy my lake so I couldn't fish. They didn't think about consequences. They didn't care. They just wanted control. Early the next morning, the county environmental department arrived after receiving my report. These weren't casual inspectors. They came in with full hazmat gear, sample kits, oxygen meters, and chain of custody bags. They took one look at the dead fish in black water and immediately treated it as a major contamination event. Within hours, county sheriff deputies showed up. Then the state environmental task force, then the water safety inspectors. Each group asked the same questions, and every answer pointed straight toward the HOA. The officials set up barriers around the lake, posting bright red warning signs. Danger, toxic water, keep out. From my porch, I watched the inspectors test the water. One of them shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't just contamination," he said. "This is deliberate dumping. The amount of pesticide here would kill livestock if it got into the soil." Another inspector added, "And their water plant pulls directly from this source? They're lucky no one's in the hospital yet." As they collected their samples, chaos erupted over the hill. The HOA's water system had been shut down entirely. Faucets sputtered, pipes groaned, and the entire neighborhood realized their water supply had been compromised beyond immediate repair. Residents were forced to fill buckets at emergency water stations. Tanker trucks rolled in. People yelled in the streets, and word spread fast. By noon, a crowd had gathered outside the HOA office, demanding answers. Parents were terrified their children had consumed toxic water. Elderly residents complained of burning eyes and stomach issues. Everyone wanted someone to blame, and Karen was their target. She tried to defend herself, telling people it was all part of an eco-friendly pest management plan, but no one bought it. Not when county officials were treating the area like a hazardous waste zone. When the sheriff finally marched into the HOA office with a warrant, it was like watching a dam burst. Officers seized records, computers, and chemical purchase orders. They questioned board members individually, separating them so no one could coordinate stories. Karen's composure shattered the moment they showed her photos of the contaminated lake alongside her signed authorization. She stammered excuses, blaming the maintenance team, blaming me, blaming anyone except herself. But the evidence was overwhelming, and every official could see it. The pesticides they used were banned statewide. The dumping violated multiple environmental protection laws. And worst of all, they had poisoned their own drinking water supply. The officials told me privately, "This is one of the worst HOA-related environmental cases we've ever seen." And for the first time, I felt a sense of justice settling over me. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth was no longer buried in mud or chemicals. It was out in the open, and the HOA had nowhere left to hide. Harmony Ridge collapsed faster than anyone expected, and once the investigation results spread through the neighborhood, the HOA's carefully polished image cracked beyond repair. By the third day without clean running water, the residents were furious, angrier than I had ever seen them. Cars lined the streets as families drove back and forth from tanker trucks to their homes, carrying heavy water jugs just to flush toilets or wash dishes. Parents gathered in driveways, sharing stories of their children breaking out in rashes. People complained about headaches and nausea, and every single conversation ended with the same words: "This is the HOA's fault." News reporters soon swarmed the neighborhood, filming the chaos and capturing the red warning signs posted around the lake. The headline practically wrote itself: HOA contaminates its own water supply. Karen could barely step outside without someone yelling at her. One resident chased her down the sidewalk, demanding repayment for medical bills. Another threatened to sue her personally. Someone spray-painted "Water Witch" and "Poison Queen" across her garage door in giant black letters before the police could stop them. The HOA board tried to hold another meeting to calm everyone down, but only 3 people showed up, and 2 of them were there just to scream at the board members. The rest of the neighborhood had already given up on the HOA entirely. That's when the lawsuits started rolling in. Families filed claims for contaminated water, property damage, medical concerns, and environmental destruction. The legal fees alone were enough to bankrupt a small town. The HOA board members began resigning one by one, each trying desperately to avoid responsibility. But the county investigation made it clear the entire board was liable. They had approved the funds. They had signed the work orders. They had ignored environmental regulations and acted without expert consultation. After days of nonstop pressure, the board held a final emergency vote and dissolved the HOA entirely. No more meetings, no more rules, no more Karen standing on her porch with a clipboard pretending to run the world. But the consequences didn't end there. The county ordered the now disbanded HOA to fund a full-scale environmental restoration project. Cleanup crews worked around the clock to remove contaminated soil, treat the water, and prevent further spread of the toxins. The cost was enormous, millions of dollars, and since the HOA no longer existed, the responsibility fell directly on the former board members, including Karen. People whispered that she had to refinance her home just to cover her share. Through all of this, I stayed mostly on my porch, watching the rise and fall of Harmony Ridge like it was a movie I'd seen coming from the start. I didn't gloat, I didn't brag, I didn't have to. Nature and justice had done all the work for me. The HOA had tried to ruin my lake, my peace, and my livelihood. Instead, they destroyed everything they built because they couldn't stand the idea of someone living freely beside them. In the end, they poisoned nothing but their own future.